Why don't we get started? Yep, right on cue. Thanks, Micah. Appreciate it, everybody, and welcome. We have a rousing audience. Oh, we actually have three. Last time we had none. Great. Welcome, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. My name is Garrett Yoshimi. I'm Vice President for IT and CIO. Whew, easy for you to say. For the University of Hawaii System, and together with Chung, co-chairing the Act 231 Broadband Working Group. So I have a script to read here, so let me read through the script just to make sure. Welcome to the working group meeting created by the Hawaiʻi Legislature to help determine how the public broadband infrastructure assets created with federal broadband spending will be held and managed. For testimony, members of the public may provide oral or written testimony on any of the items on the agenda. If you're here in person, please use the sign-in sheet at the registration table to sign up. Testimony will be taken as we go through the agenda. We do have a couple of folks that have indicated they will be online for testimony purposes. In the event of loss of connection, in the event that the AV connection is lost, the meeting will be automatically recessed for up to 30 minutes while the working group our technicians attempt to restore the connection. If it is not restored within 30 minutes, the working group will reschedule the meeting. This meeting will be recorded. And as those of you who are online, you should have gotten the little verbal message already, and then posted on the UH Broadband website along with meeting notes. Right? Questions? Anybody with concerns? Otherwise, I will call the meeting to order. Currently 9:37 a.m. Thank you for your patience as we brought everybody together on Tuesday, March 12th, 2024. We are physically here at the University of Hawaii Information Technology Center, calling the meeting to order for the Act 231 Broadband Working Group meeting. I'll call each of the working group members in order, on my list in order, to confirm your participation. For those of you that are participating remotely when responding, could you please note if there's anyone else in the room with you? We're also asking those participating remotely to make sure your camera is on for the duration of the meeting. Let me start with the roll, starting first with Department of Budget and Finance, Mark Anderson.
Here, present.
Hey, Mark, good to see you. Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Kevin Ishimoto.
Aloha.
Hey, Kevin. Department of Accounting and General Services, Keith Reagan.
Keith Regan, Comptroller for the state of Hawaii, and there is no one in my office. Thank you, except for myself, of course.
Thank you. Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, we have two folks here in person, Chung Chang to my right and Bert Lum across from me. Department of Health, Steve Sakamoto.
Steve Sakamoto, Department of Health, and just myself participating.
Thank you, Steve. And just to confirm, for Department of Education, we were not able to confirm an attendee for the meeting today. Department of Hawaiian Homelands, Katie Ducat in person, sitting across from me. County of Hawaii, Douglas Adams.
Present by myself, representing Mayor Mitchell.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it. Senior County of Honolulu, Constancio Parnell in person, also sitting across from me. County of Kauai, Nathan Prescott. He has not joined us yet. Okay, so he may sign in later, and if he does, we'll announce his joining. And then County of Maui, Jolie Jenkins.
Good morning, Jolie Jenkins, representing Mayor Bisson.
Thanks, Jolie. And then just to confirm, going back at the starter list for both Mark and Kevin, anyone else in the room with you on the Zoom call?
This is Mark.
No, there's not.
Nobody else. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. And then also joining us today, Lieutenant Governor Sylvia Luke and Michelle Kurihara-Klein, Office of Lieutenant Governor. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm sorry. This is Michelle Kurihara-Klein. I'm dealing with a short cord, so I'm having to be off camera. Lieutenant Governor will be stepping in and out of the meeting. She's greeting a school right now, but she is expected to return in a few minutes.
Understand. We have absolute priorities, and the school thing definitely takes priority over us. Right. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. The agenda is hopefully not super lengthy this morning. We have a bunch of updates to provide from the activities that have occurred over the past several months now. But we wanted to make sure we brought the group together to have all of you, to make sure all of you folks are up to date, briefed on not only the interim report that was submitted in December to the legislature, but also on the activities that have occurred since then, and to really provide, number one, some information, and then hopefully some conversations or discussion around the purpose and the potential broadband authority that we might create as a result of our conversations in recommendations to the legislature. So let me start first. We have the agenda up just to review. Even though there's a lot of bullets on the screen, this isn't a 5-hour meeting. I promise it will be relatively straightforward. Everybody should have received materials for not only the briefing deck, but as well as the copy of the report that was submitted, the interim report that was submitted to the legislature, as well as the briefing materials that we distributed in our industry advisory group meeting. For those of you that remember the last time, we did bring together a group of industry folks to help us provide additional conversations as well as recommendations into this group from their different perspectives. We opted to make that group relatively informal on purpose so that we could have as frank as possible discussions within that group. A lot of times it is difficult for those of you that have dealt with industry partners. A lot of times it is difficult to have very open conversations when multiple competitors are in the room. So the advisory group was assembled to try and at least help us break through some of those barriers and get useful comments from our industry partners to help us in our deliberations. Can you go next slide, please? So as we go into the updates, let me first, before we go through the information section, I'll call for, there's at least one person online that is interested in providing testimony for this section. Let me see if we can bring Patrick Mao on into the webinar for purposes of testimony. Patrick, are you there? No, we were having problems getting him connected.
Hello.
There he is. Hey, Patrick.
Hi. I'm sitting in for Ms. Chung, and we're just in a listening mode. Over.
Is that what the tracks from like centralized locations?
Hello.
So the JFN is getting fed from certain news codes. Maybe I guess tracks could be on the.
Hey, Patrick, we're having a little hard time hearing you. Can you maybe speak a little louder into the phone?
Okay. Yeah, my name is Patrick Mao, and I'm listening. I'm sitting in for Ms. Chung. Can you hear me?
I mean, the JFN kits used to have Minotaur as a hub. I know that's what they're talking about. Then that's the JFN kits. JFN was supposed to be.
So what's Colonel Rea asking for?
Hey, Patrick, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm sitting in for Ms. Chung, and I'm with the Department of Defense, and we're pretty much in a listening mode, but open to answer any questions that you have. I'm sorry, I had a hard time listening. I mean, hearing you.
Thanks very much, Patrick. Appreciate it. So,
Okay.
you know, for the benefit of the other folks in the room, as especially over the past couple of years, as in particular, as we've been going through some of the middle mile conversations around subsea cables and terrestrial middle mile, we have touched base off and on with our DoD partners because they obviously have interest in making sure that they can maximize benefit of the systems as well as they get put into place. And if you'll remember, I think both the Treasury and Commerce Acts also refer to being able to benefit the national defense interests as well. So obviously a big player in the Hawaii market. They are a large customer many of our telecom carriers. So, we do try to keep them up to date as far as what's going on, and make sure that in particular, the infrastructure that we are planning to deploy is of beneficial use for their purposes as well. We also have, and I'm just going to check in with you. We also have Rebecca Lieberman online. No, she's not online. Okay. So she might drop online later on. I don't think she had testimony specifically, but we did put a placeholder there for just in case. Any other folks in the audience that wish to testify on this agenda item? So we're in discussion and information section. Seeing none, let's move on to the quick briefing points. These are most of these slides were actually used in our industry advisory group briefing. I will not go through a bunch of detail on each, but we are primarily looking at a quick status update of the major large projects that are in play. I'll hit each one briefly, and then let's spend a little bit more time on the CPF one, which has our subsea project there. The largest of the projects, the BEAD allocation, the numbers on the screen reflect the federal dollars that are associated with the project. We are deep in the process of submitting documents to NTIA. We are actively in the curing process for the BEAD initial proposal, which describes not only our approach as well as our intended plans for use of the funds through both what's called the deployment and non-deployment efforts for the BEAD project. Those of you that have kept up with the lengthy reading in these federal grant programs, the BEAD project's primary priority investments are for last mile investments to cover unserved and underserved residential locations on a statewide basis, and also to make sure that our identified CAIs or community anchor institutions have access to gigabit speed Ethernet. So remember, one of the big distinctions as we go through the BEAD process, when we build stuff, this is building access, not necessarily providing free internet, if you will. So there's a very clear distinction in terms of where the federal monies get spent. But this is about making sure that the access to the commercial telecom networks can reach 100% of our residential locations on a statewide basis. That is the goal of the BEAD program. We do expect to be able to achieve that. And we've got a lot of work ahead of us in the short term, primarily document submission and approvals, but hopefully as we get through the next year, you will see the state challenge process, which is a defined process that we go through to refine the actual dots on the map, if you will. Then following the state challenge process, we'll go through a competitive selection process to get our potential contractors on board in terms of actual costs to do the work and securing contracts before we enter into what's called the BEAD final proposal, which is give or take about the end of calendar 2024. Subsequent to that is when the actual work happens, actual builds happen. So we're looking forward to getting through the process. CPF, which is the next largest one on the screen. The largest portion of that is our middle mile subsea project. I'll jump past that and then come back to it at the end. The competitive middle mile program, $37 million awarded to Hawaiian Telcom. Congratulations to Hawaiian Telcom again. Lots of work combining both terrestrial as well as some subsea components that, fortunately for both of us, don't duplicate the work that we're doing in other areas. We can attribute it to great planning on both of our parts, but their work is also begun and underway to initiate work on both the terrestrial and subsea elements that they're awarded. The project itself that Hawaiian Tel submitted was actually a total of about $80 million. So they matched the 37 million with about 50 plus million in in-kind investment from Hawaiian Telcom. So thank you very much to them for being great partners. The digital equity plan, there's actually a series of these grant programs. The first one that Bert and Chung are executing on out of DBED, the 570,000 digital equity plan is submitted, finished the curing process, hopefully ready to go. So anxiously awaiting award, hopefully soon. Following on the award, we hope to see the release of the formula and competitive grant programs out of NTIA, hopefully in the summer, fall, depending on when they get all of their statewide digital equity plans approved. TBCP, which is under the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, we're very encouraged. The initial award of about 17.2 million back at the front of the year, or actually at the end of last year. In execution now, work is underway. And then hopefully with the close of NOFO 2 at the end of this month, we're hoping for the remaining amount of 72.8 million to be awarded pending or as a result of the proposal. DHHL has actually submitted the proposal in advance. So it's wrapped up pretty early. They are currently going through, and I think this is correct, Katie, I think we're going through some revisions of the proposal now in advance of the final grant deadline. So we are hopeful that that DHHL will be one of the first out the gate when TBCP actually starts its second rounds of award. So lots of money in flow, lots of money in progress, and all of the folks around the table, lots of interest, and thank you very much. Also, lots of support to make the execution happen. Next slide, please. So broadband assets, let me talk a little bit. This is the stuff you see on the screen refers to the assets that we are anticipating out of the subsea projects, which is the project funded by Treasury under the Hawaii Subsea Middle Mile project. We are under contracts with our private partner, Ocean Networks. This is a I would say this is an unusual project for state government. It is a public-private partnership. The initial contract commits $60 million in Treasury funds as the state's investment into the private effort to create and build the submarine inter-island submarine network. As a result of that one-time investment, the state expects to, and this is together with our RFP and contract that has been awarded. The state expects to receive a 20% equity stake in the operational system once it comes online, probably at the end of 2026. In addition to rights to use, IRUs, indefeasible rights of use, rights to use one pair of dark fiber across the system, as well as some specific lit capacity for state use, dedicated for state use and for DHHL use. The great part about the way the deal was finally put together was this takes advantage of the one-time funds, the one-time federal funds that come in from the U.S. Treasury, and it will also require zero operations and maintenance costs and zero upgrade costs over the life of the system. So it completely reflects the nature of the incoming funds, as well as make sure that we have capacity to use without some hidden, by the way, you have to pay us maintenance fees for the next 25 years. This is really, I think a great outcome for the state of Hawaii. For those that are running numbers, the 60 mil initial investment actually represents about half of the cost to build the system. But because we have no commitment for operations and maintenance nor future capital calls, the resulting stake is the 20% equity stake plus the interest in the transport across the system. Let's see. Any questions before I move on? Let me hit the next slide. So the assets that and again we had an idea of about where we would end up, but subject to actually getting through our RFP process, the assets are actually more concrete in terms of what we believe and what we know we will have available to us to actually manage as we go through this process. So as a reminder, going back to Act 231 out of the state legislature of 2022, this is really, this working group is really convened to try and figure out how we would hold those assets. The original intent of the legislature was to create a Hawaiʻi Broadband Authority, an actual entity within state government. I think initially assigned or initially administratively attached to Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. But the entity is the thing, the public entity that would hold these assets and then manage them on a going forward basis. So obviously the entity needs some type of leadership, probably some board, and then perhaps a small number of staff. But the whole idea was to defer the creation of the entity until the assets had actually materialized. We knew what they were, and then figure out how to best manage that on a going forward basis. So we had put together draft language based on the original legislation that formed Act 231. It had a fairly long laundry list of duties and responsibilities as well as makeup of the board. So the board would consist of a number of ex officio positions, representative of state government entities that had interest in this area, including folks around the table. It would also, the draft legislation that we crafted for the interim report also included authority to create a special fund so that there was a place to hold any revenue from these assets so that the revenue could be used for those specific purposes. And again, making sure that the revenue generated is used in the right place. The whole intent behind looking at these assets is to make sure that number one, first and foremost, the assets are properly maintained, properly managed, and we look to sustainability of the asset over the long term. So even very long term even. So these assets are typically 25 years assets. So those of you that are familiar with some of the other systems in the water, sometimes they actually run for 30 years, depending on how well they're maintained. But the idea behind having this authority in place and having the ability to retain funds that are generated by the asset is to make sure that those funds could be used to reinvest in the either potential replacement of the asset in the future or upgrades along the way to make better use of it. I will stop there for a couple of minutes and see if there are questions around the room. Any comments? Seeing none. One of the other things we wanted to talk about today was the recommendations that are coming out of this industry advisory group. So we did meet a couple of times with our industry advisory folks. If I can summarize, and the notes were included in your packet as well. The notes were included in the distribution for this meeting. But the primary comments coming out of the industry folks were number one, and we actually had the first two comments in our first meeting, if you recall. Number one, to make sure that the authority is created in an efficient manner, because the intent is for it to be self-funded, so that we don't create just another place to spend state funds over and over again. We want to make sure that the authority is fairly lean. There were a couple of suggestions that, and I think we had this in the first meeting as well, perhaps we should consider an existing entity to add the capacity to, as opposed to creating a brand new one. So that falls along the efficiency lines. And then the third recommendation coming in was to consider an alternative to DCCA as the potential administratively attached entity. I think DCCA was originally suggested based on some of the existing regulatory duties that are related to DCCA's attached agencies, which includes the PUC as well as the cable folks that are part of DCCA. That may be a plus or a minus depending on which seat you're in. So again, one of the other recommendations was that we might consider another department as the home agency, or the agency to which the authority is administratively attached. Other than that, the conversations were not super long and very supportive of the action so far. We do have a lot of work to do, a lot of work in front of us in terms of, in particular for the subsea project, in terms of permitting. We're going to lean on our state and county folks around the room, as well as the federal folks, because there is a laundry list of permits that have to get properly vetted and approved as we go through the process. We're not intending to ask for folks to just look away and rubber stamp, but we do want to make sure that we can work collaboratively with all of our friends around the table to make sure that we can get the process done in a timely manner and then get the assets on board. Other questions? Okay, it's gonna be a fast meeting. Next slide. Okay, so for the group, we have draft recommendations in. I did not put decision-making on today's agenda because I wanted to make sure this is mainly to get folks up to speed on where we are, what's in play at this point in time. Obviously, the work on the projects will continue to go forward. I am going to suggest that we will provide another update, maybe in a few months, well in advance of the next legislative session, as opposed to cramming things in at the last minute, but well in advance to, number one, provide additional updates, and then number two, I'd ask folks around the working group to consider the draft bill that was submitted and consider the draft recommendations and take a look at, number one, if those are the right duties and responsibilities of the authority, as well as, because it's come up a couple of times, ask folks that if there are alternative entities where we could park the assets as opposed to creating a new one, to please consider what those entities might be. And then we would take that in advisement under the next meeting as we roll into the next legislative session. For those that are wondering about timing, because the assets that we're talking about right now probably don't come online until 2026, the next legislative session, the 25 session, is actually ideally timed to make this work. Frankly, the current session is very embroiled in a bunch of the Maui stuff right now. That's top of mind for everyone. So probably not a good time to work through this kind of stuff anyway. But I would like to make sure that we line up our recommendations as well as support for the 25 session upcoming, so that if we do want to recommend creation of an authority, we do have our arms around what that authority looks like, and then what the parameters of the authority will be in terms of roles and responsibilities, board makeup, and staffing as well. Okay. Questions, comments? A rousing audience, or actually we have two people in the rousing audience, not three. The other people, they're staff.
Garrett?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Doug Adams at County of Hawaii.
Hey, Doug.
Just checking, and I'm sure it's in here and I'm just missing it. In the state connectivity goals, the purpose of the infrastructure authority, we've got emergency management membership on here as well.
I don't remember, but we could always add it in. So it's like state HIEMA or something like that.
That's what I'm thinking, yes.
Okay, we'll go ahead and note that in as well, Doug. Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Other questions, comments, suggestions, recommendations? So just as a quick reminder, this group operates under sunshine, so we can't do this like mass email thing back and forth. But if there are either questions, suggestions, recommendations, please send them directly into me, and then we'll make sure that we get the pieces put together in advance of the next meeting of the group. I would anticipate, so probably maybe late summer, early fall, unless other activities require us to meet sooner. We will meet again so our pattern has been to meet with the industry advisory folks before this meeting, just to update them and then to have them provide any recommendations up, so that we're prepared to discuss them as we come into this group. And again, as a reminder, this group is meeting under sunshine, so the email conversations are verboten for the group as a whole. So please remember to direct your stuff directly to me, and then we'll distribute it as information to the group. Okay. Not seeing other people jumping up and down. Anybody else in Zoom land? Comments? Doesn't look like it. If not, I thank everybody for your attendance. And we got like almost everybody showed up with relatively short notice on a tight schedule. Thank you very, very much. I know everybody's schedule is very busy, especially with legislative session in. Hearing nothing else, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Mahalo.